Morning, I'm meteorologist Cody Matz, the Fox 9 Weather Center. I wanted to give you updates on some of the rain and freezing rain occurring here in the Twin Cities and a lot of central parts of southern Minnesota, western Wisconsin, including that as well. Live look just outside of our station in Eden Prairie, where it is still pouring at this hour, especially by January standards. You're like, rain in January? Really? Yeah, it is kind of a bizarre situation, but here's actually the good news. It's actually the heavy rain that's preventing us from getting a lot of icing conditions. Right now, temperatures officially at the freeze mark, so there's our 32. But here's the thing, we round in actual air temperature, so the actual air temperature is probably 32.3 or 32.4. And I'm telling you, that makes all the difference because the freeze mark is 32.0. So as long as you're above freezing, you're not actively trying to freeze things up. Now, don't get me wrong, the ground is frozen. A lot of our objects are frozen. Your back deck is going to be very slippery. Your sidewalks, your driveways will be quite slippery, especially as the rain starts to wind down as we get through the later part of the morning. So there's your winter weather advisories for some pockets of freezing rain, but mostly rain at this hour, especially across the Twin Cities metro at the moment. But that just adds a lot of water to the ground. And so this may be one of those situations where maybe it's not slippery when it's actively raining, but once it stops later this morning, things start to get a little dicier, especially again on our secondary surfaces as opposed to our main roads. Now, we have seen some light rain, some freezing mist and freezing drizzle, and honestly, I think the most slippery conditions, especially on area roadways, are generally just north of the metro where it's been the lightest, meaning we're getting a bit of freezing drizzle or freezing mist attaching itself to the surface. You're getting a trace or 1/100th or 2/100ths of an inch. A lot of times that can actually be slipperier because you're not actively running off rain from surfaces. If you have moving water, it is much harder to freeze, especially when temperatures are right around the freeze mark. And that's a lot of times why obviously the parts of the Mississippi, parts of the Minnesota don't actively freeze, because you have moving water. It takes a lot more energy to actually freeze those surfaces in much colder temperatures. But if the water is sitting still, aka you have a trace or you have 1/100th of an inch, it's much easier. It takes a lot less time, a lot less energy from the atmosphere to actually freeze on that surface. And that's when you can run into some issues. There's a lot of fog concerns in northern Minnesota as well. We'll talk more on that here in a second. So there you go. There's the radar. You can see that on bottom right-hand corner of your screen as well. Admittedly, this is entirely liquid. So you're not going to get a sleet pellet. You're not going to get a snowflake. This is entirely liquid. But keep in mind, Storm Vision, this is an algorithm. So it's trying to figure out what's actually falling. But I'm telling you right now, it's all liquid. So you kind of go a little cross-eyed. Let's turn that off. We're switching over sources and going to more of a summer look to things. This is obviously not severe weather, but kind of gives you an idea of where the heaviest liquid is. And quite honestly, it's right over the metro and has been. Nearly a ½ inch of rain in my house in Burnsville. We're topping a 1/4 inch officially at MSP Airport. So this is some solid rain over the last 2, 3, 4 hours or so. And right now it's still lining up right along 494, now into 394. So downtown Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul, it is absolutely pouring. Station is right about here, so you can see the deep reds. You saw the image that I started with. You can actually see MSP Airport at the right side of your screen. That's the jam cam up at the moment. That's Highway 62 and 77. You can kind of see there. And obviously MSP Airport, Highway 72 and 77, about right in there, give or take. So there you go. There's where some of the heaviest rain is. Now, like I mentioned, the lightest of rains is probably where it is most slippery. So we're talking Paynesville, St. Cloud, towards Princeton, North Branch, Cambridge, and then maybe northward towards Mora. That's where there have been reports of spinouts. We have had overnight spinouts, included, I realize I'm doing a lot of circling here, included in parts of the northwestern metro, Maple Grove, Albertville, Monticello area have had spinouts, but none of those are currently active just because as precipitation, as the rain arrived, it was light enough and the ground was cold enough that it quickly got slippery, but then the rain kind of overtook the freezing process, and so things became liquid. It is a wild, weird scenario. This is not something that happens all that often in the month of January, especially when it's raining this heavily across the Twin Cities metro. So you can see the back edge now across portions of Wright County, just pushing into western Carver County. This is a 2-hour loop. So give it a couple of hours. 2-hour loop? Yeah, 2-hour loop. So a couple hours is probably on the west side of the metro, right about 5 or 5:30. and then east side of the metro maybe a couple hours from there. So that will take us into the 7 o'clock hour if this indeed holds speed and holds intensity at the moment. So let's zoom back out. Obviously, this is all liquid to speak of. Back edge is here. That will scoot east into western Wisconsin. Obviously, western Wisconsin counties will hang on to the rain, freezing rain combo the longest. But this brings up a lot of questions of why is this freezing rain? Why is this liquid as opposed to snow? Let me walk you through that. So as warm air moves from one location to another, it is less dense than cold air. Therefore, as it moves, it actually rises. And so as warmer air moves in, you don't actually get the warmer air at the ground first. You actually get warmer air at the ground last. So it actually comes in above our heads, and that's where we run into some issues. So if everything is above 32, the entire column of the atmosphere underneath your cloud deck, that means it's rain. If everything is below 32, that means it's snow. It's that in-between zone. And so as our warm air moves in above our heads, we actually melt the snowflakes to raindrops, and then it falls to ground, to the surface where temperatures are below freezing. That's freezing rain. And so that brings up another question. Well, why doesn't it transfer back to snowflakes? That's not how this works. Snowflakes are formed from ice crystals. Ice crystals have a very specific process as they form. So they form, you get a snowflake. Once that snowflake starts to switch over to rain, that's it. It's over. It's not going back to snowflake. It could be 58 degrees below zero. And if somewhere above our heads in the atmosphere, it is warm enough to entirely melt that snowflake to a raindrop, then guess what? You're going to get rain when it's 58 below zero, which does occur, maybe not that cold, but in some of the Arctic regions, Antarctica, the North Pole, it doesn't always snow, even in the winter. It can actually rain. You get these freezing rain events. It's obviously a lot more dangerous. There's fewer people around, so it's obviously less of a problem, if you want to call it that. But it does occur even in some of our polar regions. It is just a very weird concept to actually get temperatures below freezing in active liquid, because you grow up and you're like, yeah, 32, that's our freeze mark. So one's ice, one's not. Unfortunately, it's just not that black and white, especially for Mother Nature. So temperatures become very important. Now, keep in mind, these are rounded, and that's important because you see some 32s on here. Quite likely, now, I can't confirm this, but quite likely these are 32.3s or 32.4s, as that will round down, but just above the freeze mark. Again, half a degree is very important in this case. However, where we are below freezing, or at least leaning that direction, meaning we're rounding down, that's where we'll probably have the most slipperiness, especially on secondary surfaces, your back deck, your driveways, etc. So 31 in Rogers, same story in Forest Lake and in White Bear, New Richmond, Wisconsin as well. 33 in Rosemount, Burnsville, and Shakopee. So south side of town, certainly above the freeze mark. We've kind of been flirting with that just south of the metro where rain hasn't been as heavy. We talked about actually the heaviness of the rain is preventing ice formation. So there you go. Northfield's very light precipitation so far at 31, but a lot of 32 plusers where we've seen the heaviest of the rainfall. Now the question is, hopefully we can stay just above freezing before we get some sort of refreeze later this morning, which I think we will, or at least kind of flirt with that mark. Now you get north of the rainfall, north of the liquid precipitation, and this is drier conditions. Granted, not necessarily dry. We do have some freezing fog concerns for the northern half of the state. One of the reasons why we have a dense fog advisory through at least the lunch hour from Wilmer to St. Cloud to Cambridge to New Richmond, Wisconsin, northward. So generally speaking, just north of our winter weather advisory zone and our liquid precipitation. This is essentially from so much low-level moisture, courtesy of our snowpack, and continued warming temperatures as we will look forward over the next couple of days. So there you go. There's your quarter-mile visibility or less in some cases, and then your slippery surfaces, especially on the northern half of the winter weather advisory zones, especially north of 694. kind of right along from St. Cloud to essentially Princeton and Cambridge appear to be kind of the focal point for that. So here's that day planner. Rain will fade by around sunrise. Obviously, your results will vary depending on your location in the metro because it will be done a couple of hours sooner on the west side, likely before the east side. But you get the general idea. West side probably done 5:30 or 6. East side done around sunrise, so 7:30. And then western Wisconsin will be after that. Officially, our winter weather advisory goes through into the lunch hour, mainly for when the rain stops and things start to settle. There may be some sort of refreeze factor, especially on our secondary surfaces. So this is a sneaky, slippery scenario into the lunch hour. This afternoon, we will be above freezing by a couple of degrees, and then there will be a refreeze component later on this evening and tonight, especially just after the dinner hour and after that evening commute. There will likely be some areas of fog overnight as well. Okay, so that's your update here on Fox 9 and fox9.com. Of course, you can tune back into us. We will live stream just like we do every morning, but this morning's a little different. We're going to start at 4 a.m., so you will see the Fox 9 Morning News at 4 a.m. So we'll see you back here in about 20 minutes with more updates.